the founder of Diabolism, is a Mo Xuanyu novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 11. The seat of the Gusulan clan was located deep inside the mountains outside the city of Gusu. Surrounded by a picturesque arrangement of gardens, pavilions, and rivers, the residence's black roofs and white walls were shrouded in mist year-round, a paradise floating atop a sea of cloud. The first glimmers of dawn shine through the early morning fog, perfectly complementing the place's name, the cloud recesses. The mountains were silent, and the people were silent, their hearts and minds like still water. The only noise was the sound of the bells echoing from the high tower. Though the cloud recesses was no Buddhist temple, the same lonely and meditative air pervaded its cold peaks. But suddenly, the atmosphere was disrupted by a long cry, startling many disciples who were in the midst of their morning reading or sword practice into shivers. They were unable to stop themselves from peering toward the main entrance, the source of the noise. Wei Wuxian stood before the gate, crying and clinging onto his donkey. Lanjing I said, "Why are you crying? You're the one who said you like Hangongjun. Now he even brought you home. So what are you howling for?" Wei Wuxian's eyebrows were wrinkled, his lips frowned, and his face was the perfect picture of misery. After the night at Dafan Mountain, he hadn't had a single opportunity to resummon Wenning, or to investigate why Wenning had lost his conscious awareness. Even less did he know why his old right-hand man had returned to the mortal world, yet Lan Wangji had already taken him back home. When Wei Wuxian was young, he and the junior disciples of other clans had been sent to the Lan clan for 3 months to receive instruction, during which he had personally had a taste of the Gusulan clan's oppressive dullness. He was still suffering from lingering trauma caused by the 3,000+ clan rules etched in cramped lines over the entire surface of the wall of discipline. Earlier, when he was being hauled up the mountain like a captive, he had glanced at that rock wall as they passed, only to find out another 1,000 rules had been added. Now there were over 4,000. 4,000. Lanjing I said, "All right, stop being so noisy. Making a racket is prohibited inside the cloud recesses." Wei Wuxian was making a racket because he didn't want to enter the cloud recesses. Once he was dragged inside, escape would be difficult. Back when he had come for the lectures, every clan's disciples had been given a jade token, which they kept on their person in order to freely enter and exit. Otherwise, there was no way to pass through the barrier surrounding the cloud recesses. Over 10 years had passed since then, so security could only have grown tighter. Lan Wangji stood silently before the mountain gate, watching Wei Wuxian with a cool, detached gaze, turning a deaf ear to his wailing. He waited for them to dampen, and then said, "Permit him to cry. Once he tires, bring him in." Hugging the little donkey, Wei Wuxian cried even more pathetically and smacked his head into his animal companion a few times. Too cruel. He had believed getting whipped by Zidian would clear him of any suspicion, and thus had been momentarily filled with smug glee. His runaway mouth always quick to tease, he had even embarrassed Lan Wangji. But who knew the man's reaction would be worlds away from what it had once been? What sense was there in that? Was it possible that, after so many years, not only had his level of cultivation increased tremendously, but so had his narrow-mindedness? Wei Wuxian said, "I like men, and your clan has so many beautiful men. I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself." Lan Sizhui tried to reason with him. "Young Master Mo, Hangongjun actually brought you here for your own good. If you hadn't come with us, Chief Zhang wouldn't have let you go. These past several years, he's caught and dragged countless people back to Lotus Pier and tortured them for information. He's never let anyone go. Lan Jing'ai said, "That's right. You've probably never seen Chief Jiang's methods yourself. They're downright cruel." At this point, he remembered the prohibition against talking badly about someone behind their backs and snuck a glance at Lan Wangji. Only upon seeing that Hangang Jun had no intention of punishing him did he dare to continue muttering. "It's all the Yuling fault for stirring up trouble. So many people are copying him instead of learning cultivation properly. Not to mention, Chief Zhang suspects everything that moves. If he tries to catch everyone, when will he ever be done? And look at yourself, playing your flute like that, humph." This humph said more than 1,000 words. Wei Wuxian felt the need to defend himself. "This really, I mean, if I told you, you might not believe me, but normally my flute playing is pretty decent." Before he could finish, several white-robed cultivators stepped through the main gate. They wore the Lan uniform, which resembled slow, soft billows of unadorned snow. The man standing at the head was tall, slim, and graceful, and around his waist hung not just a sword, but also a xiao of white jade. When Lan Wangji saw him, he bent his head slightly in accordance with etiquette, and the man did the same in turn. He looked at Wei Wuxian, smiled, and said, "Wangji never brings guests home. What's your name?" When the man stood across from Lan Wangji, it was like seeing two sides of a mirror, except Lan Wangji's eyes were light like ceramic glaze, whereas the man's eyes were gentle, warm, and dark. He was Lan Huan, the chief of the Gisulan clan, Zhuojun Lanzikan. Different places, water and soil nurtured different kinds of people. The Gisulan clan had always been widely known for producing many beautiful men. But this generation's twin jades were unusually beautiful, even by the standards of Lan clan. Though the two brothers hadn't been born at the same time, their appearances were very similar, and it was difficult to say whose was superior. But though they looked nearly identical, in disposition, they were like night and day. Lanzikan was gentle, warm, and open-hearted, whereas Lan Wangji was excessively solemn and cold, and kept everyone at 1,000-mile distance, thus he could not be described as the least bit amiable. In the world of cultivation, the former was considered first among all of the young masters in behavior and appearance, and the latter the second. Lanzikan was every bit deserving of the title of clan chief. Upon seeing Wei Wuxian clinging onto the donkey, not a single odd expression crossed his face. Smiling from ear to ear, Wei Wuxian released the animal and greeted him. The Gisulan clan attached a great deal of importance to seniority and hierarchy. If he vomited nonsense in front of Lanzikan, they would beat him with a stick all the way from the cloud recesses to the bottom of the mountain. But who would expect that just as Wei Wuxian was preparing to conspicuously extend his hand, Lan Wangji would glance at him and seal his lips shut? Lan Wangji's gaze returned to Lanzikan and he continued speaking politely. "Brother, will you visit Lian Fangzun again?" Lanzikan nodded. "We will be deliberating over the plans for the next discussion conference at Jinlin Terrace." Unable to open his mouth, Wei Wuxian trudged resentfully back to the donkey's side. Lian Fangzun was the current chief of the Lanling Jing clan, Jing Guanjiao, one of Jing Guangshan's acknowledged illegitimate children. He was Jin Ling's uncle, and the half-brother of Jin Ling's father by birth, Jin Zixuan, as well as the half-brother of Mo Xuanyu. Though he and Mo Xuanyu were both illegitimate, their fates were as different as heaven and earth. At Mo Manor, Mo Xuanyu slept on the ground and was forced to eat others' leftovers, whereas Jing Guanjiao occupied the highest position in the cultivation world, able to call the rain and summon the wind if he so chose. If he wanted to call Lan Zikan to Jinlin Terrace, he did it, and if he wanted to hold a discussion conference, he did that too. But it was hardly a wonder the Lan and Jin chiefs had such a sincere personal friendship. After all, they were sworn brothers. Lan Zikan said, "Uncle has taken the object you brought back from Mo Manor for inspection." Upon hearing the words Mo Manor, Wei Wuxian's interest couldn't help but be piqued. He felt his lips part. Lan Zikan had lifted the silencing spell. The clan chief said to Lan Wangji, "Not only is it rare for you to bring home a guest, it's also rare to see you this happy. But be sure to behave hospitably, not like this." Happy? Wei Wuxian scrutinized Lan Wangji's face closely. How could anyone tell he was happy? After watching Lan Zikan leave, Lan Wangji said, "Haul him in." Wei Wuxian was thus dragged into the place he had promised never again to set foot in. Prior to this, all who had entered the gates of Lan clan had been distinguished cultivators. The clan had never had such a guest before, so all the juniors involved in pushing, shoving, and pulling Wei Wuxian in found the experience novel and a great deal of fun. Were it not for their clan's strict rules, they would have giggled the entire way. Lan Jing'ai said, "Hangang Jun, where should we take him?" Lan Wangji said, "The silence room." The silence room. Wei Wuxian had no idea what was happening. Everyone else stared at each other in shock, afraid to make a sound. The silence room was Lan Wangji's study and bedroom. He never let anyone inside. Minimalistically furnished, the silence room did not host a single superfluous object. A chin table sat in front of a silk screen painted with drifting clouds which slowly changed with the wind. In the corner, sitting atop a three-legged incense stand, was a latticework incense burner made of white jade. A light smoke rose from it in delicate spirals, filling the room with sandalwood's cold fragrance. When Lan Wangji left to discuss important matters with his uncle, Wei Wuxian was shoved inside the room. But not long after Lan Wangji stepped outside, Wei Wuxian's foot was also through the door. He strolled around the cloud recesses, and sure enough, he found he needed a jade token to pass the gates. Even if he climbed over the meters-high white walls, the wards would immediately fling him off, and furthermore, the stunt would attract all of the nearby patrolmen post-haste. Wei Wuxian had no choice but to return to the silence room. Regardless of the kind of difficulty he encountered, he was never truly anxious. He paced back and forth around the space, confident that sooner or later, some solution would find its way into his head. The cool, clear scent of sandalwood pervaded the room, and though it didn't exactly trigger sentimental feelings, it had its own particular poignancy. He began speculating idly. Lan Zhan's scent must come from the fragrance drifting out of the incense burner. It probably sticks to his clothes when he's here practicing the gukkan or meditating. After having these thoughts, Wei Wuxian couldn't help but edge towards the incense stand in the corner. As he approached, he noticed the wooden floorboard beneath his feet was obviously different from the others. Curiosity piqued, he began knocking on the floor around him in all directions. In his previous life, he had done more than his fair share of grave robbing and sniffing out holes in the ground, so he found and flipped the loose board before too long. The fact that he had discovered a secret compartment in Lan Wangji's room was already a surprise enough for Wei Wuxian. But when he saw clearly what was hidden inside, he was stunned speechless. Though it had been nigh imperceptible when folded into the sandalwood, once the wooden floorboard had been lifted, the scent of liquor filled the air, wafting from the 7 or 8 round, pitch-black jars inside the little square cellar below. Lan Wangji had indeed changed. Now he even hid liquor inside his room. Alcohol was prohibited inside the cloud recesses. Because of this, the first time Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji had met, they had gotten into a minor scuffle, and Lan Wangji had even knocked over a jar of Emperor's Smile he had brought up all the way from Gusu city, at the base of the mountain. After he left Gusu and returned to Yunmen, Wei Wuxian never had another opportunity to taste the renowned Emperor's Smile. For his whole lifetime, he always said that when he had the chance, he would return and try some, but he never did. There was no need to open the jar to figure out what kind of alcohol was hidden here. As soon as he smelled it, he knew it was Emperor's Smile. He had had no idea he would discover one day that someone who was as much of a stickler for the rules as Lan Wangji, who had never touched a drop of alcohol before in his life, had in fact dug out a secret compartment in his room for the purpose of hiding the forbidden drink. The heavens had truly rewarded him with his reincarnation. Wei Wuxian sighed ruefully as he downed a jar. His alcohol tolerance was very high, and he always craved it. After thinking for a moment, he concluded that Lan Wangji owed him a jar of Emperor's Smile, and after the debt had gone so many years unpaid, he surely deserved some interest as well. Thus, he drank another jar. Just as he had drunk enough to be tipsy, his mind had a flash of brilliance. How hard could it actually be to get a jade passage token if he really wanted one? Inside the cloud recesses, there was a cold spring with mystical properties, which the male disciples of the clan were permitted to use for cultivation. Some said it had the ability to calm hearts, cleanse minds, cool inflammation, these types of effects. When entering the cold springs, the disciples naturally had to remove their clothes, and after removing all their clothes, they would hardly use their mouths to hold onto the jade tokens. Wei Wuxian clapped his hands and finished off the last mouthful of the jar he was currently drinking. Glancing around the room, he found there was nowhere to throw away the empty jars, so he filled them with water, sealed them, and hid them back where he had found them, returning the wooden board to its place atop the hidden cache. With his work complete, he went to look for a jade token. Though the cloud recesses had been burned down before the Sunshot campaign, the layout remained exactly the same when it was rebuilt. Relying on memory, he navigated through the twisting, obscure paths, and after not too long, he found the secluded cold springs. The disciple who was supposed to guard the springs was very far away. Another region of the cloud recesses was dedicated to female cultivators, so they never came to use the springs. Moreover, the security was light since no one in the Lan clan dared to do shameless things like hiding by the cold springs spying. The situation made it very easy to fool around, conveniently allowing Wei Wuxian to do said shameless things. Very coincidentally, atop the white rock behind the thicket of orchids was a set of white robes. There was already someone here. The white robes were folded infuriatingly neatly, to the point where they resembled a block of snow-white tofu. Even the forehead ribbon was folded without a single thread out of place. Wei Wuxian almost didn't have the heart to mess the arrangement up when he stuck out his hand to fumble through it for a jade token. As he passed through the thickets of orchid grass, his eyes swept around the cold spring, until his gaze suddenly caught on the figure in the water. The cold springs weren't like hot springs, the water was so cold it stung to the bone, and there was no veil of hot mist permeating the air and bewitching the eye. Consequently, Wei Wuxian could see the upper back of the person in the springs with perfect clarity. The man was tall and slender, with lovely, fair skin, his hair dark as black lacquer, damp and hanging over one side of his neck. The lines of his waist were slim and sleek, both elegant and strong. In short, he was a beauty. But the reason Wei Wuxian couldn't tear his eyes away definitely had nothing to do with being stunned by the sight of this beautiful man bathing. However beautiful he was, Wei Wuxian wasn't really attracted to men. The actual reason he couldn't look away had to do with the things on the man's back. Dozens of scars were etched onto his skin, crisscrossing back and forth across his spine. These were whip marks. In the world of cultivation, there was a type of whip sex reserved for punishing disciples who had committed a grievous wrong. The scars from this whip's lashes never faded. Though Wei Wuxian had never been struck by it, Zhang Cheng had. Despite racking his brains and trying everything, he had never come up with a method to lighten the shameful marks. Thus, Wei Wuxian would never mistake these scars. Usually, the one being punished was only lashed once or twice. The whip already taught a very harsh lesson, more than enough to engrave the episode into wrongdoers' memory for their entire life. They would never dare make such a mistake again. Yet, by a conservative estimate, this person's back had at least 30 whip scars. What kind of sin could he have committed to be beaten so badly? If it had really been so disgraceful, why hadn't they just killed him? At this time, the man in the springs turned around. Beneath his collarbone, near his heart, there was a distinct, brand-like mark. As soon as Wei Wuxian laid eyes upon it, he was completely dumbfounded. End of the chapter. Chapter 12. The scar stole away all of Wei Wuxian's concentration, and he wondered if he was hallucinating. Breathing in strained and irregular gulps, he was too mesmerized to spare the man's face a single glance. Suddenly, the scene in front of his eyes turned pure white, as though a snowy curtain had dropped before his face. The curtains parted shortly after, and the tip of a blue blade snapped toward him, accompanied by icy wind. Hangang Jun's sword, Baikan, was famed for its martial prowess. Oh no, it was Lan Wangji. Ducking and running from swinging blades was, fortunately, familiar territory for Wei Wuxian. Rolling away immediately, he very narrowly dodged the first attack, and while fleeing the cold springs, he even had some time to peel off the blade of grass that had gotten stuck to his hair. Like a headless house effigy, however, he immediately ran straight into a group on nightly patrol. They seized him and began to admonish him. Why are you racing around everywhere? Running is prohibited inside the cloud recesses. Upon discovering the patrolmen were Lan Jing'ai and the others, Wei Wuxian was overjoyed. Now someone would finally brandish a stick at him and chase him out and down the mountain. Immediately, he presented himself. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything at all. I'm definitely not here to watch Hangang Jun bathe. Immediately, the juniors were struck dumb by Wei Wuxian's audacity. Everywhere, Hangang Jun was as revered as the high, holy mountains. He was a personage whose name could not be profaned, and the younger disciples of his own clan venerated him like a god. To hide near the cold springs to spy on him bathing. Even the thought of such a thing was a reprehensible, unforgivable crime. Lan Sizui was so frightened his voice had changed. What? Hangang Jun? Hangang Jun is there. Furiously, Lan Jing'ai yanked Wei Wuxian over. You gay bastard! You'd spy on him too. Wei Wuxian sealed his criminal reputation while the iron was hot. But I didn't get a single glimpse of Hangang Jun without his clothes on. Lan Jing'ai sputtered angrily. You're like someone who hides silver in his backyard and then puts up a sign saying no silver here. You're still saying you didn't do it? Well, if you didn't do it, then why are you sneaking around like some sort of perverted ghost? Look at yourself, you're too ashamed to even show your face. Wei Wuxian had indeed covered his face with both of his hands. Do you have to be so loud? Making a racket is prohibited inside the cloud recesses. Just as they began flapping at each other like confused dogs and headless chickens, Lan Wangji emerged from the thick bed of orchid plants, his long hair loose and white robes draped over his body. Within the space of a few seconds, he was already dressed perfectly neatly, baiken still unsheathed. All of the juniors rushed to greet him politely, and Lan Jing'ai began blabbering rapidly. Hangang Jun, this Mo Xuanyu, he's just repulsive. You only brought him back because he helped us out at Mo Manor, but he. Wei Wuxian thought this time, his actions must be beyond anything Lan Wangji could bear. Surely, now he'd be swiftly kicked out of the mountain gate. But in fact, Lan Wangji did nothing more than briefly sweep his eyes over the offender. Silent for a moment, he sheathed baiken with a shing, and said, "Everyone, go." The 3 syllables were uttered calmly and lightly, yet were powerful enough to preempt any objection, causing everyone to disperse forthwith. Nonchalantly, Lan Wangji grabbed and lifted Wei Wuxian by the back collar and lugged him towards the silence room. In Wei Wuxian's past life, he and Lan Wangji had been roughly the same height, and were both slender and unusually tall. Wei Wuxian had only been a tiny bit shorter than Lan Wangji when they stood next to each other, there was barely a centimeter's difference. But after awakening to a new life in a new body, he was a full 7 centimeters or so shorter than his old acquaintance. Though ordinary people would still consider him tall and slim, while Lan Wangji dangled him over the ground, he was completely unable to put up a fight. He struggled, stumbled, and was on the verge of shouting, but Lan Wangji said coldly, "Those who make an uproar will be silenced." Though Wei Wuxian had tried and failed to get thrown off the mountain, he had to decline being silenced, "Thank you very much." No matter how he thought about it, he was unable to comprehend what was happening. Since when did the Lan clan have so much tolerance for an utterly shameless delinquent who spied on such a distinguished member of their family bathing? When Lan Wangji hauled Wei Wuxian inside, he made a beeline for the inner chamber and threw said delinquent onto his bed. Wei Wuxian thudded as he landed and let out a cry of pain. Unable to right himself at first, it was a while before he finally managed to struggle into a sitting position. Contemplating feigning coquettish anger to unsettle the man, he lifted his head and glanced at him. Towering over his head, Lan Wangji held baiken in one hand, gazing imperiously down upon him. Wei Wuxian was accustomed to seeing second master Lan with his forehead ribbon and hair tied neatly, meticulous in every detail, not a single thread out of place. The sight of his raven hair slightly disheveled and his frame wrapped only in a thin garment was entirely foreign, and he couldn't help but slightly stare. Moreover, after the dragging and floundering and staggering, Lan Wangji's originally tightly closed collar had been pulled open, and a well-defined collarbone peeked through the gap as did the crimson brand beneath it. Once more, the moment Wei Wuxian's eyes fell upon the scar, his attention was hostage to it. Before he had become the Yuling Lazu, his own body had also borne such a scar. What's more, Lan Wangji's was, in both location and shape, exactly the same. Wei Wuxian couldn't help but find the mark familiar, but strange. And speaking of strange, the 30 or more whip scars on Lan Wangji's back were also strange. Second Master Lan had made his name at a young age. Everyone heaped high praise upon him, and he was widely known as the most orthodox and punctilious of cultivators. He was one of the twin Jades, the pride of the Gasulan clan, and older generations all viewed his every word and action as the standard of excellence for all of their disciples. What unforgivable thing could he have possibly done to be subject to such a brutal punishment? To have 30 or more whip scars, he must have been beaten within a hair of death. Once the injuries were inflicted on his body, the scars would stay his entire lifetime, so he never forgot, and would never commit such a crime ever again. Following Wei Wuxian's line of sight, Lan Wangji lowered his gaze almost imperceptibly when he pulled his collar shut, covering his collarbone and hiding his scar, thus transforming into the frosty Hangang Jun once more. Just then, the heavy toll of the clock echoed into the room from the outside. The Lan clan's rules were rigid and exacting, and their schedule of work and rest extremely strict. They went to sleep at exactly 9 at night, and rose at exactly 5 the next morning, supervised by the bells ringing. Listening to the clock with rapt attention, Lan Wangji said to Wei Wuxian, "You will sleep here." Without leaving him any chance to reply, he turned and crossed into the other partition of the silence room, leaving Wei Wuxian lying crookedly on the bed, deeply bewildered. It wasn't as though he hadn't suspected Lan Wangji had guessed his true identity. But the problem was that it made no sense from the perspective of logic or feeling. Since bodily sacrifice was a forbidden technique, by necessity very few people knew of it, and because only pieces of the instructions had survived, there was no way to actually use it. This had been the case for a long time, and thus even the number of people who believed in the idea had dwindled. It was a mystery exactly how Mo Xuanyu had gotten hold of a copy of the secret scroll detailing the procedures for casting the spell, without which he couldn't have summoned Wei Wuxian. In any case, Lan Wangji could hardly have concluded that the person in Mo Xuanyu's body was him purely based on some bad flute playing. Even after searching his soul, Wei Wuxian didn't think he and Lan Wangji's friendship in his previous life had been anything like the kinds of relationships which were engraved in hearts and carved into bones. They had been students together, faced danger together, and fought side by side, but these moments had been like falling petals or running water, quick to come and quick to go. Lan Wangji was a disciple of the Gisulan clan, which fated him for a life of refinement and propriety, incompatible with Wei Wuxian's natural temperament. Though he couldn't call their relationship poor, he couldn't with a straight face say it was good either. Lan Wangji's opinion of him was probably the same as others. He probably thought that the virtue in Wei Wuxian's spirit was lacking, whereas the evil in it ran rampant, and one day it had inevitably come back to haunt him. After Wei Wuxian had defected from the Yunmenjiang clan and become the Yuling Lizu, more than a little bad blood had developed between him and the Gisulan clan, especially in the few months prior to his death. If Lan Wangji had definitively identified him as Wei Wuxian, the sect should already have beaten him until both the ground beneath his feet and the sky above his head turned black. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Once upon a time, Lan Wangji had been unable to tolerate anything he did, however small. But now, no matter how demonically or monstrously he behaved, Lan Wangji tolerated it all. Should second master Lan be congratulated for his rapid progress? Wei Wuxian stared helplessly at empty space for a long time before rolling off the bed and sneaking very quietly into the other partition. Lan Wangji lay on his side atop a second bed, apparently already sunken into a deep sleep. Without breathing or making a single noise, Wei Wuxian approached him. His heart still beating with determination, he prepared to pat down Lan Wangji to see whether he could feel out that elusive jade token. But as soon as he reached out his hand, Lan Wangji's long lashes trembled and his eyes opened. Wei Wuxian steeled his heart and flung himself onto the bed. Lan Wangji hated being touched by other people, Wei Wuxian remembered. Before, if someone touched him, they were liable to be sent flying, so if the man still tolerated Wei Wuxian's behavior, then he couldn't possibly be Lan Wangji. The Yuling Lizu could only suspect it was his friend's body which had been stolen. Wei Wuxian's entire frame was atop Lan Wangji's, his legs spread, kneeling on either side of the man's waist. He propped up his torso with his hands, trapping his old acquaintance between his arms, and slowly lowered his head. The two faces grew closer and closer, closer and closer, to the point where he began to have difficulties breathing. Then, Lan Wangji finally opened his mouth. After a period of heavy silence, he said, "Off." Summoning the thickest skin he possessed, Wei Wuxian said, "No." A pair of light, pale eyes, almost within his reach, met his gaze. Lan Wangji stared fixedly at him and repeated, "Off." "No. When you let me sleep here, you should have realized this would happen," Wei Wuxian said. "Are you certain you want to do things this way?" Lan Wangji said. Wei Wuxian didn't know why, but he had a feeling he needed to consider his next reply carefully. As soon as he was about to lift the corner of his lip, his waist suddenly went numb and his legs grew weak. Soon after, his entire body collapsed on top of Lan Wangji. The half-formed smile now frozen on his lips, his head laying against the man's chest, he realized he was paralyzed from head to toe. Lan Wangji's voice resonated from above. His voice was low and heavy, and his chest rumbled faintly with every syllable he uttered, "Then perhaps you should spend the entire night this way." Wei Wuxian hadn't had an inkling that this would be the outcome of his antics. He struggled and tried to sit up, but his waist continued to be sore and weak. Thus, he had no choice but to stay in this embarrassing position, lying right on top of another man's hard body, struck stupid by the whole situation. What had happened to Lan Wangji over the years? How did he turn out like this? Was this really the same Lan Wangji? The one who had had his body stolen could only be Hangongjun, right? Just as waves of shock and terror were crashing over Wei Wuxian's heart, the man in question suddenly raised his torso slightly. Wei Wuxian roused himself, thinking Lan Wangji had finally reached the limit of his endurance. But he did nothing more than gently wave his hand. The light went out. End of the chapter. Chapter 13. Wei Wuxian thought for a bit afterwards and remembered his relationship with Lan Wangji had been quite bad. The root of the problem could probably be traced to when he was 15, which was the time when he and Zhang Cheng had both gone to live and study with the Gisulan clan for 3 months. The Gisulan clan had a great and famous old veteran named Lan Qiren, who the cultivation world widely considered to possess 3 special characteristics: traditionalism, inflexibility, and the ability to produce brilliant students through his strict instruction. Though the first 2 points led most to keep him at a respectful distance, and some to secretly dislike him, the last caused many to use every method at their wits' disposal to send their children to him to receive his teachings. The Lan clan had produced many outstanding disciples under his hand, and even children who had started as useless pieces of dog excrement were able to at least look respectable once they had studied in his classroom for 1 or 2 years. Exhibiting an incomparable improvement in bearing and etiquette, the children often moved their parents to tears when they were finally reunited. To this, Wei Wuxian declared, "Aren't I already respectable enough now?" Zhang Cheng's reply exhibited a great deal of foresight. "You're almost certainly going to become the one shameful failure of his teaching career." At the time, other than the Yunmenjiang clan, there were also many other sons of other clans, whose parents had all sought out Lan Qiren and begged him to allow their children to attend. None of these young masters were older than about 15 or 16, and all had frequent dealings with each other's clans, so though they weren't close, their faces were at least mutually familiar. Everyone knew that though Wei Wuxian's surname wasn't Zhang, he was the top disciple of the Yunmenjiang clan, and the son of an old friend of the chief, Zhang Fengmian, who viewed the boy as though he was his own child. Moreover, the youths didn't care nearly as much about background and ancestry as the older generation, so they warmed up to each other very quickly. Within the space of a few sentences, they began calling each other brother and speaking without regard to etiquette. Someone asked, Clan Jiang's lotus pier has to be a lot more fun than this, right? Laughing, Wei Wuxian said, whether it's fun or not depends on you. There are definitely a lot fewer rules, and there's no need to wake up so early. The Gisulan clan not only woke up at 5 a.m. and slept at 9 p.m., but they also permitted no sluggishness. Another said, when do you guys wake up? What do you do every day? Zhang Cheng snorted, him? He wakes up at 9 and goes to sleep at. And once he wakes up, he doesn't practice swordsmanship or meditate, he goes to play in the water or go boating or pick lotus seeds or hunt pheasants. No matter how many pheasants I hunt, I'm still number one, Wei Wuxian said. One of the youths said, next year I want to study at Yunmen. No one better try and stop me. Promptly, a bowl of cold water was thrown over him. No one's going to stop you, only your older brother will break your legs. That youth immediately withered. He was the King He Nai clan's second young master, Nai Huaisang. His older brother, Nai Mingzhu, had always been famed for his fighting prowess, and conducted his affairs with the force of lightning and the speed of wind. Though the two brothers were not born of the same mother, the bonds of sentiment between them ran deep and true. Nai Mingzhu guided his younger brother very strictly and was extremely attentive to his education. But though Nai Huaisang revered his older brother, he was terrified of the prospect of Nai Mingzhu bringing up his schoolwork. Wei Wuxian said, actually, Gisu is pretty fun too. Brother Wei, listen to my heartfelt advice, Nai Huaisang said, the cloud recesses is nothing like Lotus Pier. During your visit here, you have to remember never to provoke a certain someone. Who? Lan Qiren. Wei Wuxian said. No, not that old man. The one you have to be careful around is his favorite student, Lan Zhan. Wei Wuxian said, Lan Zhan of the Lan clan's twin jades. Lan Wangji. The Gisulan clan chief's two sons, Lan Huan and Lan Zhan, enjoyed the pretty moniker the Gisulan clan's twin jades, and by the age of 14 had set the standard against which the seniors of all clans compared their own disciples. Among the juniors, they were especially famous, so the names echoed through everyone's ears like thunder. Nai Huaisang said, is there another Lan Zhan? Of course it's him. My gods, he's the same age as us, but he doesn't have a bit of the lively energy people are supposed to have at our age. He's so stiff and severe he's even worse than his uncle. Oh, Wei Wuxian said. Is he the pretty one? Zhang Cheng scoffed. Is there a single ugly person in the Gisulan clan? They don't even accept outer disciples whose features aren't good looking enough. Go, find me a single one with a mediocre face. He's really pretty, Wei Wuxian emphasized, before gesturing towards his head. He dresses only in white, has a ribbon around his forehead, and carries a silver sword. Even though he's good looking, his stiff face makes him look like he's in mourning. Yes, him. Nai Huaisang said with certainty. He paused a moment. But he's in secluded meditation today. If you got here yesterday, when could you have seen him? Yesterday night. Yesterday night, yesterday night. Zhang Cheng was stunned. But there's a curfew in the cloud recesses. Where did you see him? How come I don't know about this? Wei Wuxian pointed. There. He was pointing at the roof of a high wall. Everyone met this revelation with silence. Anxiety was making Zhang Cheng's temples and jaw tense. He gritted his teeth. You just got here and you're already getting into trouble. What's wrong with you? Laughing playfully, Wei Wuxian replied, Kman, it's not as bad as you're thinking. When we were on the road here, we passed that Emperor's Smile liquor store, right? Yesterday night, I tossed and turned until I couldn't stand it any longer, then I went down to the city and brought a couple of jars back. You can't find this stuff in Yunmen. Then where's the liquor? Zhang Cheng said. Well, right as I made it over the wall, before my foot even touched the ground, he got me. One of the youths said, brother, you really won the lottery. He had probably just left seclusion for his night patrol duties, and he just happened to catch you red-handed. Anyone coming back at night isn't allowed in until 5 a.m. the next morning, Zhang Cheng said. Why'd he let you in? Wei Wuxian raised his hands. He didn't let me in. Told me I had to remove the leg that had crossed the boundary. You tell me how, exactly. So he suddenly floated over to me and asked me what was in my hands. Zhang Cheng sensed an incipient headache, and an ominous feeling came over him. And you said? Emperor's Smile. I'll give you a jar, and you pretend you didn't see anything, okay? Zhang Cheng sighed. Alcohol is forbidden inside the cloud recesses. That's even worse. He told me the same thing, Wei Wuxian said. I asked him, why don't you just tell me what your clan doesn't prohibit? He looked a bit angry and wanted me to go read the discipline wall at the front of the mountain. Honestly, who's going to read 3,000 plus rules? And they're written in seal script too. Have you read them? Have you read them? Anyway, I didn't read them. But what's there to be mad about? Exactly. Everyone sympathized with him, and one by one they began making all sorts of complaints about the cloud recesses' outrageous, old-fashioned ways. The boys regretted they hadn't met and spoken sooner. What clan has over 3,000 unique clan rules? No killing living things inside, no private fights, no promiscuity, no wandering around at night, no rackets, no rushing about. These kinds of things are understandable. But rules like, no laughing for no reason, no sitting improperly, no more than 3 bowls of rice. Wei Wuxian asked hastily, wait, private fights are forbidden too? Yes. Don't tell me you fought him, Zhang Cheng said. Yeah, I did. He even knocked over one of my jars of Emperor's Smile. All who were gathered slapped their thighs in regret and cried loudly about how tragic the loss was. Since the situation could hardly be worse, Zhang Cheng changed the focus of his questions. Didn't you bring back 2 jars? Where's the other? I drank it. Where did you drink it? Zhang Cheng said. In front of him. I said, all right, since liquor is prohibited inside the cloud recesses, I won't come in. I'll stand right on this wall and drink it. That doesn't count as breaking the rules, right? So I downed the whole thing right in his face. And then. That was when we fought. Brother, Nai Huaisang blurted out in astonishment. You're truly brazen. Wei Wuxian raised his eyebrows. Lan Zhan's got some skills. You're going to die, brother Wei. Lan Zhan's never gotten the worst of it like that. He's probably going to come after you. You'd better be careful. Sure, Lan Zhan isn't attending the lectures with us, but he's the member of Lan clan who's in charge of punishments. Wei Wuxian wasn't the slightest bit scared. He waved his hand dismissively. What's there to be afraid of? Hasn't Lan Zhan been known to be a child prodigy since he was little? If he was so precocious, then he must have learned all of his uncle's teachings a long time ago. If he's in seclusion all day, how can he come after me? Before he was finished, the group rounded a wall with an open-style window and saw that the elegant room inside held a youth dressed in white, sitting upright and still. His long hair was tied up, a ribbon was wrapped around his forehead, and his whole body seemed shrouded in frosty mist. His chilly gaze swept over them. Immediately, the 10 or so mouths slammed shut, as though struck by a silence spell all at once. Silently, the youths shuffled into the room, and silently, they chose their seats and sat down. Silently, they left all of the writing desks around Lan Wangji empty. Zhang Cheng patted Wei Wuxian on the shoulder and quietly said, "His gaze is pinned on you. Good luck." Wei Wuxian turned his head and caught sight of Lan Wangji's side. His eyelashes were fine and long, graceful and beautiful beyond words. His posture was also incomparably straight and proper, and his gaze was directed perfectly forward. Just as Wei Wuxian intended to speak to him, Lan Qiren walked into the room. Lan Qiren was tall and thin, with a ramrod straight back. Though he possessed a long beard resembling a black mountain goat's, he was not at all old. Moreover, according to the Gasulan clan's tradition of producing beautiful men each generation, he also wasn't at all ugly. It was a pity he had a rigid and pedantic aura about him which made referring to him as an old man feel entirely appropriate. When he opened the scroll he had entered with, it tumbled to the floor and unrolled itself all over the ground. He then began lecturing on the rules of the Lan clan. As the boys sat and listened, their faces started to turn green. Wei Wuxian grew bored and his eyes began to dart randomly around the room, until they landed on Lan Wangji's profile, and upon seeing that the boy's expression was one of completely sincere solemn concentration, he couldn't help but be stupefied. He can still pay such close attention, even when the material is this dull. Suddenly, Lan Qiren threw down his scroll and smiled coldly. "No one reads what is carved into the rock wall, this is why I must read out the rules one by one. From now on, we shall see who still tries to make excuses from ignorance. Even under these circumstances, there are people whose minds wander. Very well, then I will speak on another topic." Though these words of warning could have been directed at nearly anyone in the room, Wei Wuxian suspected they were aimed specifically at him. Indeed, Lan Qiren called, "Wei Ying." "Present," Wei Wuxian answered. "Let me ask you, are fae, demons, ghosts, and monsters all the same kind of being?" Wei Wuxian smiled. "No." "Why not? What are the differences between them?" "Fae come from living non-humans, demons from living humans, ghosts from dead humans, and monsters from dead non-humans. Fae and monsters are often confused. Give an example of the difference." "Sure." Wei Wuxian pointed at an elegant, jade-green tree outside. "Let's take a living tree and suppose it's basked in an aura of literary fame for 100 years and becomes a conscious being through cultivation. If it then begins to cause humans trouble, it would be classified as a fae. On the other hand, if I took an axe and cut it down, leaving only a dead tree stump, and it cultivated a consciousness, it would be considered a monster." "What was the profession of the founder of the King He clan?" "Butcher." "The emblem of the Lanling Jing clan is a white peony." "What kind of white peony?" "Venus above the billowing snows." "Who was the first person to prioritize the strengthening his clan at the expense of his sect?" "The founder of the Qishan Wen clan, Wen Mao." He answered these questions fluently, and the others' hearts rose and fell with his words as though riding atop turbulent waves. They thanked their lucky stars while simultaneously praying for Wei Wuxian not to stumble, so that Lan Qiren never got a chance to pick on anyone else. But the old man said, "As a disciple of the Yunmenjiang clan, You should already be so familiar with this information you could have recited it backwards years ago. Answering these questions correctly is nothing to be proud of. Let me ask you another. An executioner with a mother, father, wife, son, and all the usual complement of loved ones has beheaded over 100 people. He is then murdered in the streets and his body is left to rot in the sun for 7 days. Full of resentment, his corpse rises and begins to haunt the town, violently attacking the citizens. What should be done? This time, Wei Wuxian didn't answer immediately, so the others assumed he didn't know and began shifting nervously in their seats. Lan Qiren berated them. Why are you looking at him? You need to contemplate this question as well. No flipping through your books. Everyone immediately pulled their hands away from said books, which they had already been preparing to open. Following Wei Wuxian, they fumbled through the question, murdered in the streets, body left to rot for 7 days, a very fierce corpse. It was indeed a very difficult situation. They would only be safe as long as old man Lan didn't pick on them. Seeing that Wei Wuxian had yet to answer, though a long time had already passed, Lan Qiren looked pensive and said, Wangji, you explain to them what should be done. End of the chapter. Chapter 14. Lan Wangji did not aim a single glance in Wei Wuxian's direction. He nodded his head politely, and quietly said, First, release the spirit from suffering. Second, suppress it. Third, eliminate it. For the initial approach, use the loving memory of his parents, wife, and children to comprehend his deepest desires and fulfill them. If this fails, move to suppression. But if the crimes are too great and his resentment too bitter to dissipate, eliminate him root and branch. His continued existence must not be permitted. Cultivators must conduct themselves carefully in accordance with the sequence of measures, without error. Everyone released the breath they had been holding and thanked the heaven and earth that the old man had picked Lan Wangji. If it had been their turn, they would have found it impossible not to overlook a few things or confused the order of steps. Nodding his head with satisfaction, Lan Qiren said, not a single word misplaced. After a moment, he spoke again. Regardless of whether one is acting as a cultivator or simply a human being, one must stand on foundations as firm as those which have just been displayed. If one becomes arrogant and self-satisfied because of successes against a few local monsters or ghosts, thus making an empty name for oneself, then disgrace will come sooner or later. Wei Wuxian raised his eyebrows, and, glancing at Lan Wangji's profile, thought, so the old man's after me after all. He called his prized student in to attend the lecture to make me watch. He said, I have a question. Speak, Lan Qiren said. Wei Wuxian said, it's easy to say the first thing you should do is grant the ghost's wishes, but that's often impossible. If all he wanted was a new set of clothes, of course it would be easy, but if it's to kill someone and their whole family for revenge, then what? Lan Wangji said, thus release from suffering is the primary strategy, suppression, supplementary, and elimination, the last resort. Wei Wuxian smiled slightly. Isn't that a waste of resources? He paused for a moment, then said, the reason I didn't give an answer wasn't because I didn't know it. I was only thinking about a fourth solution. Lan Qiren said, I have never heard of a fourth solution. This executioner died a violent death, so it's inevitable his body would turn into a fierce corpse. Since he beheaded over 100 people while he was still alive, why not dig up their graves and incite their resentful energy to use against him? 100 heads should be enough to fight a fierce corpse. Brows slightly wrinkled, Lan Wangji finally turned his head and looked at him with eyes of ice. Even Lan Qiren's beard started trembling. The old man shouted, "You arrogant! You have no idea of the height of the heavens nor the depth of the earth." Everyone inside the elegant room stared at them in shock. The old man suddenly shot up. "The purpose of subduing demons and exterminating ghosts is to alleviate suffering. Not only have you forgotten this, you want to incite further resentment. You are inverting the means and the ends, without a care for humanity. If some people's suffering can't be relieved, why not make it useful?" Wei Wuxian replied. "When you the Great One tamed the floods, redirection was the superior strategy, and obstruction the inferior. Suppression is like obstruction, it can only be worse." Lan Qiren flung a book at Wei Wuxian, who quickly ducked out of the way. The color of his face unchanged, he continued to run his mouth. "Spiritual energy is energy, but resentful energy is also energy. Stored inside cores, spiritual energy is able to cleave mountains and drain seas, and is available for human use. Why can't humans use resentful energy too?" Another book flew toward him. Lan Qiren roared, "How can you promise that it will obey you and never bring others to harm?" Wei Wuxian dodged. "I haven't thought of the answer yet. If you had figured it out, the cultivation world would no longer have you." Out. Having gotten exactly what he wanted, Wei Wuxian immediately got out. He wandered around the cloud recesses and enjoyed himself, blowing on flowers and playing with the grasses for half of the day. After the lecture was finished, the other students looked all over for him, only to finally find him atop the eaves of one of the high walls. Wei Wuxian sat on the blue-gray tiles, a piece of grass hanging from his lips, his right hand propping up his cheek. One leg was propped up in the air and the other dangled from the rooftop, swaying lightly back and forth. The people below pointed to him and said with laughter, "Brother Wei, we admire you so much. The old man told you to get out, and you really did it?" After you left, it took him forever to realize what had happened. His face turned purple when he figured it out. Wei Wuxian chewed on the piece of grass and yelled down at them. "He had questions for me, so I answered, he told me to leave, so I left. What else does he want from me?" Nai Huaisang said, "Old man Lan really seems like he's coming down especially harshly on you. Every time he reprimands someone, it's always you." Zhang Chen grunted. "He deserves it." What kind of answer was that? He can get away with saying that sort of nonsense at home, but he had the nerve to say it to Lan Qiren's face. He was practically asking for the old man to kill him. "He won't like me no matter what I say to him, so I might as well say what makes me happy," Wei Wuxian said. "Plus, it's not like I blew up at him. All I did was answer his questions." Nai Huaisang thought for a while. "Actually, I thought what you said was very interesting," he said, not entirely able to hide his envy and yearning. "To get spiritual energy you have to cultivate it yourself, and you can only form a golden core with a lot of hard work. It takes years for people who were born without talent, like me. It's like I'm missing something because a dog bit me when I was in the womb. But all resentful energy comes from fierce ghosts and demons and so on, so as long as you can take it, you can use it. How amazing that would be." A cultivator formed a golden core, a golden sphere inside their body, after their cultivation reached a certain level of proficiency. With it they could store spiritual energy for later use, and after forming the core, their abilities would suddenly take off. The more they cultivated, the more spiritual energy they accumulated. But cultivators had to surmount this high peak first, or else they could only be amateurs. Ordinarily, a son of an important house who had formed his core late would be too ashamed to bring it up, but Nai Huaisang wasn't even embarrassed. Wei Wuxian laughed. Right? Not using it is a waste. Enough, Zhang Cheng warned. Whatever nonsense you spout, you better not head down that sort of dark road. Wei Wuxian smiled. If I didn't want to walk down the big, sunny avenue right in front of me, why would I want to walk down some wooden plank in a shadowy ravine? If it was really that easy, someone would have done it a long time ago. Just relax. He was only asking, and I was only answering. Hey, are you guys coming? We should take advantage of the time before curfew. Come with me and hunt some pheasants. Hunt what pheasants? Zhang Cheng said reprovingly. Since when are there pheasants here? Why don't you go copy the collection of righteousness first? Lan Qiren told me to tell you that you need to copy the first section of Justice 3 times, so you can learn the principles of virtuous human relations properly. The collection of righteousness was the book of the Lan clan's teachings. Originally, the teachings were far too long, so Lan Qiren had to revise and gather them into one extremely thick anthology, 4/5 of which was taken up by the sections named Justice and the section named Rights. Wei Wuxian spat out the piece of grass in his mouth and patted off the dust that had gathered on his boots. Copy it 3 times. Just once could send me flying to heaven. It's not like I'm a member of Lan clan, and I don't have plans of marrying in either. Why do I need to copy their house's teachings? I refuse. I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you. Nai Huaisang said immediately. Anyone who offers favors out of the blue is hiding something, Wei Wuxian said. Spit it out, what do you want from me? It's like this, Nai Huaisang said. Old man Lan has a bad habit. Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly went silent, coughed dryly, unfolded his fan, and shrunk to one side. Wei Wuxian realized something was wrong and looked around. Sure enough, Lan Wangji stood beneath an old tree with lush foliage, carrying baikan and gazing in his direction. His whole body mottled by the sunlight and the shadows of the leaves, the boy looked like a magnolia tree in bloom. However, his gaze was anything but friendly, being glared at by Lan Wangji was like being dropped into an icy cave. Knowing they had shouted a bit too loudly to the rooftop, everyone shut their mouths on their own initiative, afraid that the ruckus had lured him over except Wei Wuxian, who hopped to the ground and beckoned him over. Wangji. Lan Wangji turned around and walked off, but Wei Wuxian chased after him gleefully, shouting, "Brother Wangji, wait for me." The boy's fluttering white robes flashed behind a tree. Then, in the blink of an eye, every trace and shadow of him vanished. It was obvious he didn't want to speak to Wei Wuxian. Having only caught the sight of his back, Wei Wuxian decided there was no point in trying to follow, so he turned back to the others. "He's ignoring me," he complained. "Yeah," Nai Huaisang said. "Looks like he actually does hate you. Lan Wangji ordinarily isn't. No, he's never been this rude before. He hates me already." "I was thinking of apologizing to him," Wei Wuxian said. "Oh, so you want to apologize now?" "It's too late." Zhang Cheng said derisively. "He's exactly like his uncle. He thinks you've been wicked ever since you were an embryo, so it's beneath his dignity to pay you any attention." Wei Wuxian objected noisily. "If he decides to ignore me, he's just going to ignore me, huh? Is he really that beautiful?" Thinking over it again, Wei Wuxian remembered that Lan Wangji was indeed very beautiful. In any case, he easily tossed that little lip-curling desire to the back of his mind. Another 3 days passed before Wei Wuxian learned what Lan Qiren's bad habit was supposed to be. The contents of the old man's lectures were incomparably long and tedious, and unfortunately, the students would be tested on their memory of all of it. The changes several generations of various clans had gone through, how their power was divided, famous names and famous sayings, their family trees. Listening to it was like trying to read a book written in the celestial tongue, and regurgitating it was like selling your body to slavery. Thus, Nai Huizang copied justice 2 times for Wei Wuxian, and when the exam drew close, he began pleading. Please, I'm begging you, Brother Wei, this is my 3rd year at Gasu. If I still do badly, my brother really is going to break my legs. Direct relations, collateral relations, main clans, branch clans, there's too much to keep straight. Disciples from big clans like us can't even remember our own relations clearly once we're further away than second cousins. We just call everyone aunt and uncle. Who has the spare brains to memorize someone else's family tree? During the exam, little strips of white paper containing surreptitiously copied answers danced over the students' heads, causing Lan Wangji to suddenly spring up and seize some of the instigators of this misbehavior. Lan Qiren's fury now at its boiling point, he exploded and sent letters of complaint flying to each of the major clans. His heart was filled with pure loathing, though this group of disciples was unable to sit still. Previously they had nonetheless forced their posteriors to remain firmly planted atop their calves and hadn't caused any trouble. But then Wei Ying came and provoked the would-be miscreants, who had larceny in their hearts but not enough guts to act on it without him egging them on. Now, if they wanted to go out at night, they went out, and if they wanted to drink, they drank. The atmosphere of corruption festered. Sure enough, this Wei Ying had turned out exactly as he had expected as one of humanity's greatest threats. Zhang Fengmian's reply letter read, Wei Ying has always been like this. I am sorry he has caused you so much trouble, sir. Please discipline him appropriately. Thus, Wei Wuxian was punished again. Originally, he hadn't given it much mind. Wouldn't he just be sentenced to copying some books? He never lacked helpers for that sort of thing. However, this time, Nai Huizang said, Brother, my hands are tied. You'll just have to endure this one. What? Wei Wuxian said. Old, Mr. Lan said you have to copy both justice and rights. Of the 12 chapters that made up the Lan clan's teachings, rights was the thickest and heaviest. It was extremely tedious and full of rare characters, seemed to go on forever, and constantly quoted the classics. Copying it once would sap his life of all its color. If he copied it 10 times, he could ascend directly to heaven. He also said that while you're being punished, no one is allowed to fraternize with you, or help you copy, Nai Huizang said. How could he know whether someone's helped me or not? Wei Wuxian questioned. Is he going to make someone watch me until I'm done? Yes, actually, Zhang Cheng said. What did you say? Zhang Cheng said, he's not allowing you out. Every day, you're going to go to the library pavilion and copy from that book. In the process, you'll conveniently be forced to reflect on your misdeeds. Of course there'll be someone watching you. As for who it is, you don't need me to spell it out, right? Inside the library pavilion. 1 woven mat and 1 table. 2 candle holders, 2 people. One sat still and upright, whereas the other, Wei Wuxian, had copied over 10 pages of rights and already he felt dizzy and faint. Bored out of his mind, he abandoned his pen in order to take a breath of fresh air and glance at the person sitting across from him. Back in Yunmen, many girls from the Zhang clan had envied him because he was going to go study with Lan Wangji. They had said that the Gasulan clan produced generation after generation of beautiful men, and that among his generation, the twin jades were uncommonly beautiful. Before this, Wei Wuxian hadn't had the opportunity to scrutinize Lan Wangji's face from head on. Looking at it now, he indulged in some idle thought. He is pretty good looking. I can't pick out a single flaw in his appearance or posture. But if only the girls all came here and saw him in person. No matter how beautiful his face is, his looks won't rescue him if he spends the whole day looking like he's mourning the death of his parents and scowling like he's nursing some kind of undying hatred in his heart. Lan Wangji was retranscribing a centuries-old book from the library pavilion's secret chamber. His writing was unhurried and precise, possessing a purity of line and angle. Wei Wuxian couldn't help but blurt out heartfelt praise. Nice calligraphy. Top quality. Lan Wangji was unmoved. Wei Wuxian had rarely ever shut his mouth for so long, and now he felt unbearably suffocated. He thought, this person is so incredibly stuffy. An old man Lan wants me to sit across from him several hours every day, for a whole month? Is he trying to kill me? Having thought this far, he couldn't resist leaning just a little bit forward. End of the chapter. Chapter 15. Wei Wuxian easily found ways to entertain himself, and he was especially skilled at finding amusement in the middle of hardship. Since there was nothing else to amuse himself with, he could only use Lan Wangji. Brother Wangji, he said. Lan Wangji was as motionless as high mountains. Wangji. He behaved as though he couldn't hear. Lan Wangji, Wei Wuxian said. Lan Zhan. Lan Wangji's brush finally stilled, and he slowly lifted his head and shot Wei Wuxian a cold glare. The trouble-making boy ducked back and raised his hands in self-defense. Don't look at me that way. I only called you by your birth name because you wouldn't answer to Lan Wangji. If you're upset, you can call me by my birth name too. Put down your leg, Lan Wangji said. With his body tilted sideways and his leg in the air, Wei Wuxian's posture was anything but proper. Upon seeing he had finally provoked Lan Wangji into opening his mouth, he felt a burst of hidden delight, as though the clouds had parted and revealed the light of the moon. He did as the boy said and put his leg down, but he also unconsciously leaned closer and pressed his arms against the table, leaving his posture just as indecorous. Solemnly, he said, Lan Zhan, I have a question. Do you really hate me? Lan Wangji's gaze dropped, and his eyelashes cast fine shadows upon his jade cheeks. Immediately, Wei Wuxian said, come on. You only said a few words and now you're ignoring me again. I want to own up to my mistakes and apologize. Could you look at me? After a moment, he continued, so you aren't going to look at me? That's okay, I'll say it anyway. I was wrong that evening. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have snuck out, or drunk alcohol, or fought with you. But I promise I wasn't trying to provoke you. I really hadn't read your clan's rules. The Zhang clan's rules are just told to us verbally, they aren't written down. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have done it, definitely wouldn't have drunk that jar of Emperor's Smile in your face. I would have hidden it somewhere and drunk it secretly in my room. Every day I'd drink and share it with everyone until we're all satisfied. He spoke again. Also, I mean, let's be reasonable here, who was the person who started the fight? You. If you hadn't struck first, we could have talked it out and cleared everything up. But if someone hits me, I have to hit them back, you know? You can't blame me for that. Lan Zhan, are you still listening to me? Look at me. Young Master Lan. He snapped his fingers. Brother Leon, give me some face, Look at me. Lan Wangji didn't even glance up. Copy the book another time. Immediately, Wei Wuxian's body slumped. Ah, man, don't be like this. I was wrong, okay. The other boy exposed his lie mercilessly. Your remorse is not the least bit sincere. I'm sorry, 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 Wei Wuxian said utterly shamelessly. However many times you want me to say it, I'll say it. I can even kneel if you want. Lan Wangji set aside his brush. Thinking that the boy had finally reached the limit of his patience and was about to hit him, Wei Wuxian prepared a laugh and a sunny smile. But suddenly, he discovered his lips were glued shut, preventing him from even cracking open his mouth. The color of his face drastically changed. "Uhn, he said with the greatest effort. Lan Wangji closed his eyes and let out a light breath. When he opened his eyes, his expression was tranquil again, and he lifted his brush as though nothing had happened. Though Wei Wuxian had heard of the Lan clan's horrible silencing spell long ago, he had refused to believe in something so evil. But even after messing with his lips for so long their corners had been scratched red, he could still find no way to pry his mouth open. Thus, he nabbed a piece of paper, let his brush fly across the page, and threw the product at Lan Wangji. The boy glanced at it before crumpling it into a ball and throwing it away. Ludicrous. Wei Wuxian was so peeved that he rolled over his mat, climbed up, and wrote another. He slapped it in front of Lan Wangji, who crumpled it into a ball and threw it away again. The silencing spell didn't lift until after Wei Wuxian had finished his copying. The second day, upon re-entering the library pavilion, he discovered that all of the wads of paper littering the floor had been removed. Wei Wuxian had always been the type who forgot the pain of an injury as soon as it healed. Yesterday, he had suffered the effects of the silencing spell, yet today, he felt his mouth itch intolerably after sitting for about half an hour. Live or die, he started to speak, but before he had gotten out more than a couple of sentences, he was silenced again. Since he was unable to open his mouth, he scrawled a few things on a sheet of paper and shoved it at Lan Wangji, who again crumpled the missive up into a ball and threw it on the floor. The third day passed in the same manner. Again and again Wei Wuxian was silenced, up to the very last day of his punishment. On this day, Lan Wangji noticed that Wei Wuxian seemed somewhat different. During his entire stay at Gasu, the troublemaker left his sword everywhere. Lan Wangji had never seen him wear it properly. But today, he had indeed brought it with him, slamming it on the side of the table. Furthermore, he didn't stubbornly try to harass Lan Wangji hundreds of different ways, and picked up his brush as soon as he sat down without uttering a single word. He was so obedient that it was bizarre. Though Lan Wangji was given no reason to silence him, he did glance at him a couple of times, as though unable to believe the boy from Yunmen had suddenly become so well behaved. But sure enough, Wei Wuxian grew tired and miserable after not too long, and started to lapse back into his old bad habits. He sent a piece of paper over to Lan Wangji and pestered him to take a look. Lan Wangji thought it would contain yet more random, pointless nonsense, but some god or demon must have induced him to glance over it anyway. Surprisingly, it was actually a remarkably true-to-life portrait, portraying a figure sitting upright and still, reading quietly under the light streaming through the window. The figure was, in fact, Lan Wangji himself. The corners of Wei Wuxian's lips quirked up as soon as he saw that the boy hadn't immediately averted his gaze. He wiggled his eyebrows at Lan Wangji and winked. Even unspoken, the meaning was clear. Was it good? Did it look like him? Instead of employing your free time to copy, you choose to draw random pictures. I suppose your punishment will never end, Lan Wangji intoned slowly. Wei Wuxian blew on still wet brush strokes and spoke with a flippant attitude. I'm already done copying, so I won't be coming tomorrow. Lan Wangji's long, slender fingers seemed to slow before flicking to the next page of the slightly yellowed volume before him, but he didn't silence Wei Wuxian. When the latter saw that he had failed to provoke the Lan boy, he took the picture and lightly threw it at him. Take it. The picture fluttered onto a bamboo mat, but Lan Wangji had no intention of picking it up. Over the course of these days, Wei Wuxian had scrawled apologies, words of anger or hatred, and pleas of mercy freely, and the missives had all been treated the exact same way. He was used to it and paid it no mind. Suddenly, he said, I forgot. I need to add something. He picked up his brush, made a few more strokes, glanced at the picture, then glanced back at the real person, and fell to the ground laughing. Setting aside his book, Lan Wangji scanned the image and discovered that Wei Wuxian had added a flower to the hair by his temple. The corner of his lips seemed to pull back. Wei Wuxian climbed up and hastily preempted him. Ludicrous, right? I just know you're going to say it's ludicrous. How about you use a different word? Or add a syllable or two? Extremely ludicrous, Lan Wangji said coldly. Wei Wuxian clapped. You added a few syllables after all. Thanks. The boy withdrew his gaze, picked up the book he had set on the table, and reopened it. But he barely glanced at it before hurling it away, as though burned by a tongue of flame that had sprung out of the pages. Originally, he had been reading Buddhist scripture, but the image that had flitted before his eyes a few moments ago was of two naked figures, intertwined. It was an intolerable sight. Someone had swapped the book he was reading for a book of erotic pictures in disguise. It didn't take any brains to figure out who it was. Wei Wuxian must have taken advantage of his distraction and struck when he had been looking at the portrait. What's more, that idiot had no intention of hiding it, and in fact slapped his hand against the table, laughing maniacally. Ah ha 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 ha. As though fleeing a nest of scorpions, Lan Wangji retreated immediately to the corner of the room. Wei Ying, he hissed furiously. As Wei Wuxian had practically rolled under the table laughing, he struggled to raise his hand. Here. I'm here. Swiftly, Lan Wangji drew Baikan. Since the time they had first met, Wei Wuxian had never seen him lose his composure quite so badly. Hurriedly, he grabbed his own sword and drew a third of the blade out of the scabbard. Manners, second master Lan. Mind your manners, he reminded the boy. I also brought my sword today. We can fight, but don't you want your clan's library to stay intact? He had predicted the embarrassment would send Lan Wangji flying into a rage, and had brought his own sword specifically to prevent the boy from inadvertently stabbing him to death. The tip of Lan Wangji's sword was pointed at him, and his pale eyes seemed prepared to shoot fire. What kind of person are you? What kind of person could I be? I'm a guy. Wei Wuxian said. Lan Wangji's tone was cutting. You have no shame. I have to be ashamed. Don't tell me you've never looked at these things. I don't believe it. If Lan Wangji had any deficiencies, the fact that he had no idea how to hurl invective was one of them. After pausing a while to suppress his anger, he raised his sword and pointed it at Wei Wuxian again, his expression bitter as frost. Leave. We have already fought. Wei Wuxian shook his head, pretending to be cute. No fighting, no fighting. Don't you know, second master Lan? The cloud recesses forbids personal fights. He was about to pick up the book Lan Wangji had flung away, but the latter snatched it from him, clutching it tightly in his hands. The cogs in his head turning, Wei Wuxian surmised the boy was planning to report him, with the book as evidence. "Why are you trying to fight me for this? I thought you weren't going to look at it?" "So you are going to look at it now," he said deliberately. "If you want to look at it, you don't have to fight me for it. I brought it specifically to lend it to you. Once you've seen my porn, you're my friend, and we can keep hanging out together. There's more." Lan Wangji's face had turned white, and he spoke every word like a sentence. "I will not look at it." Wei Wuxian continued distorting reality. "If you aren't going to look at it, why did you snatch it from me? To hide it so you could keep it for yourself? You can't do that. I borrowed it from someone else. Once you're done with it, I've got to return it. Hey, 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 don't come over here. I get nervous when you get too close. If you have something to say, just spit it out. You weren't going to hand it in, were you? Who were you going to give it to? Your uncle? Second Master Lan, is this really something you can turn over to your family elders? They're going to think you looked through it yourself before presenting it to them. Considering how thin your skin is, I'm afraid you might die of shame." Lan Wangji's spiritual energy poured into his right hand, and the book was shredded into a million tiny pieces, which fluttered around before drifting down from the air. Wei Wuxian's concern that his crime would be discovered eased once he saw he had successfully provoked the boy into destroying the corpse and burying the evidence. He feigned a great sorrow. What a waste! He nipped a scrap of paper that had landed on his hair and raised it to Lan Wangji's face, which was still pale with anger. "Lan Zhan, everything about you is great, except your love of throwing things everywhere. Tell me, how many wads of paper have you tossed to the ground these past few days? Today, even throwing those wads of paper isn't enough to satisfy you, you have to shred things too. Well, since you made this mess, you should clean it up. I'm definitely not going to take care of it." Of course, he would never had taken care of the messes in the first place. Lan Wangji had endured so much, but at last, he could endure it no longer. "Get the hell out," he roared. "Oh, I see now, Lan Zhan," Wei Wuxian said. "Everyone praises your noble character and acts like you're the brightest pearl of our illustrious world. No one could be more courteous and more proper. But I guess it was only talk. Don't you know the cloud recesses prohibits making a racket? And you even told me to get the hell out. Is it your first time using this kind of language?" Lan Wangji drew his sword and jabbed at him. Hastily, Wei Wuxian leaped onto the windowsill. "All right, if you want me to get the hell out, I'll get the hell out. I'm the best at getting the hell out. You don't have to see me to the door." He jumped out and down from the library pavilion, laughing at top volume like a lunatic, plowing down everything in his path. As he leapt into the forest, he found there were already people waiting. "So how was it? Did he look at it? What expression did he make?" Nai Huaisang said. "His expression?" Wei Wuxian said. "Ha! His shouting was deafening just a little while ago, didn't you guys hear it?" "We did hear it." Nai Huaisang's face was filled with reverence. "He told you to get the hell out." "This is the first time I've ever heard him talk like that." "How did you do it?" Wei Wuxian's expression was as gleeful as the spring breeze. "We should celebrate. Today, I helped him break a rule for the first time. You saw, right? Before me, Second Master Ian's renowned learning and self-possession collapses in a single blow. A dark expression shadowed Zhang Cheng's face, and his voice was filled with anger. Why are you so proud of yourself? What is there to be proud of? Is being told to get out some amazing accomplishment? You're making our entire clan lose face. Wei Wuxian said, I tried really hard to apologize to him, but he didn't even pay attention. He silenced me for days and days, so what's wrong with messing with him a bit? I gave him Brother Huizang's precious porn with good intentions. It's such a pity what happened to it. I didn't even get to finish the book, but it was magnificent. This Lan Zhan is so unromantic and cold. He even got upset when I offered it to him. What a waste of his face. No need for pity. Nai Huizang said. However much of it you want, I have. Zhang Cheng smiled grimly. Now that you've thoroughly offended both Lan Wangji and Lan Qiren, you're basically dead tomorrow. No one's going to clean up your corpse either. Wei Wuxian waved and hooked his arm around Zhang Cheng's shoulders. No need to be so concerned. First, I tease them, and then whatever happens, happens. You've dealt with my corpse so many times already, so what's once more? Zhang Cheng's foot flew at him. Scram! 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 The next time you do these things, don't let me know. And don't invite me to watch. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.